So the Las Vegas Aces have lost basically their entire team. Almost their entire team is gone from last year. They've lost basic.
AA and the Las Vegas Aces are collapsing. Wilson is under more pressure than ever before. Imagine winning back-to-back.
If we want to look at the Vegas Aces team from last year, who's still remaining? The MVP, Jackie Young, Chelsea Gray.
It's not WNBA titles, and then watching your teammates depart one by one in addition to key players, role players, and even coaching. Staff players are leaving a championship-winning team for the Indiana Fever and Caitlin Clark. In this video, we're dissecting
this. We gotta talk about the Aces, who are left with a shell of a roster right now. They have to fill out every other spot. They have a not top 5 roster in the W, and they have to fill out every other spot.
Everything that's happening behind the scenes that has everyone fleeing, from the startling departures to the implications for the Aces and Wilson's future in AA. Wilson never imagined that the day would come when her team, the Las Vegas Aces, would be dismantling her dynasty in front of her eyes. The previous 2 seasons had been dream back-to-back championships.
I mean, obviously we have to get better. We have to really take a sharp look at ourselves, look ourselves in the mirror, see our shortcomings, and then, you got to make the moves necessary, whatever that means, to put the best product that we possibly can. It's not going to be the same group probably next year.
With a loaded roster and a city that welcomed them as heroes. But now she was watching her teammates leave one by one, leaving her stranded in what was once the most dominant WNBA team in the He withdrawals first appeared to be minor losses. After a championship run, it's common for players to look for other choices, but then the big NAM began going, first with Kelsey Plum, then with Alicia Clark, and then with Sydney Coulson. A role player here, a bench piece, nothing too major. Tiffany Hayes and even the coaching staff members themselves. Wilson could only watch helplessly as her championship squad collapsed before her eyes during the exodus. But she wasn't the only one who sensed the change. The whole Aces fan base was shocked by how this could have happened. How did a team go from being at the top of the league to complete anarchy in a matter of months? The answer wasn't straightforward. There were other factors at play, including bad management, dubious contracts, a poisonous workplace, and the increasing popularity of several teams, particularly the Indiana Fever. The Aces had established a reputation as a dominant force during the previous few seasons. They played with an attitude that shouted they were unbeatable, and for a while they were, but that confidence eventually turned to complacency. Before anyone realized it, the foundation of their dynasty had cracks too deep to ignore. The issue began with the roster itself, where the Aces still had their core AA on paper. The front office began basing decisions on past performance rather than future sustainability. Wilson, Jackie Young, and Chelsea Gray should have been sufficient to keep the club competitive, but they failed to take into consideration how much they were losing in depth. The loss of Kelsey Plum was tragic. When she left for the Sparks, it was the first clear indication that something was amiss because she was more than simply a scorer. She was a leader who infused the squad with vitality and a presence that was difficult to replace. Players don't simply quit championship teams unless there's a compelling cause for it. The loss of Alicia Clark, a defensive anchor, seasoned player, with championship experience and player who kept teams balanced, was like a direct blow. Then, Sydney Coulson and Tiffany Hayes packed their bags and left for teams that were either rebuilding or preparing for a deep playoff run. The worst part was that the Aces were powerless to stop it, and salary cap issues had left them handcuffed. Chelsea Gray. The Aces signed Joel Lloyd to a near-max contract instead of finding a way to balance the roster, because Jackie Young and Wilson all had large contracts. On paper, adding Lloyd seemed like a good idea because she was a scorer, a seasoned player with experience, and someone who could help relieve Wilson of some of the scoring pressure. But the issue was that she was inconsistent. The Aces were unable to offer competitive deals to the role players who had been the foundation of their success because of Lloyd's unstable shooting percentages and unpredictable performances. At that point, the players realized that the front office was giving priority to certain contracts over team depth, that the once dominant team was no longer set up for long-term success, and most importantly, that there were better opportunities elsewhere. For many of these former Aces players, Indiana Fever turned out to be an unexpected destination. It wasn't simply about money or even a new beginning. It had to do with the future. The arrival of Caitlin Clark transformed everything for the Fever, who had been a struggling team. The WNBA had never seen such exuberance in years. Clark was not just a young player with promise. She was a potential generational talent and a franchise-altering star. With Indiana actively encircling her, the players took notice and realized the Fever was making wise decisions. Howard, Natasha Denana Boner, Sophie Cunningham, and the other important acquisitions were wanting to win, not just get better. Players who had previously considered the Aces to be the league's top destination were suddenly focusing on Indiana. Wilson couldn't believe that after years of helping to turn the ES into a powerhouse, everything was falling apart. Then, there were rumors about Becky Hammond. At first, the rumors were subtle, with some players expressing dissatisfaction with the way the team was being managed and rumors that Hammond's coaching style wasn't popular with them. The championship success had concealed a lot of those concerns, but now that things were falling apart, those concerns were coming to the surface. Was Hammond too demanding? Was she unwilling to adapt? Did she alienate certain players no one wanted to say it outright, but the signs were there? The players weren't just leaving for more money or better opportunities, they were leaving because something wasn't working. In Vegas, even team owner Tom Brady had to be concerned when he invested in the Aces. He envisioned a dynasty, a powerhouse that would dominate for years. But now his team was barely holding itself together. The tipping point came when reports surfaced that Wilson's contract was set to expire soon. That changed everything. Wilson wasn't just another player. She was the face of the franchise. Losing role players was one thing, but losing Wilson, that would be the ultimate collapse. The fear started creeping in. Could Wilson leave too? The front office scrambled to reassure fans that everything was under control. They talked about retooling, about making adjustments, about finding ways to keep the team competitive. But the reality was much harsher. The Aces had already lost too much. The Indiana Fever were rising the high. New York Liberty were already stacked. The Minnesota Lynx were making aggressive moves. The league was shifting, and Las Vegas was no longer the top destination for players looking to win. When more players kept leaving the Aces, Wilson knew she had to choose between staying and trying to salvage what was left, trying to keep the team competitive and rebuilding from the ground up, or leaving and joining a team that was creating something unique, joining a team that was ready for the future, and joining a team where she wouldn't have to bear the burden of an entire franchise alone. Wilson couldn't deny that her time in Vegas might be coming to an end, and that her departure would be the last straw for the Las Vegas Aces, marking the end of an era. Wilson was aware that she needed to make a decision, and it was becoming more difficult for her to ignore the fact that AA was staring her in the face every day. This wasn't just another off SE, it was the one that would determine the fate of the Las Vegas Aces, Wilson's career, and the legacy she had created. Wilson sat in her car parked outside the AC's practice facility, holding the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles became white. The departures have continued to occur. The lineup appeared completely different, and the rumors about Becky Hamm had changed from murmurs to yells. Wilson had been attempting to comprehend everything for the past few days, and each morning she awoke to yet another shocking revelation. She wasn't stupid. She knew basketball was a business, but this was something different. Another star was departing, another deal was coming apart, and another pundit was wondering if the Aces were done as a dynasty. It wasn't simply Caitlin Clark who made the Indiana Fever the league's most talked-about team. Players weren't picking Indiana merely to play with Clark. They were choosing stability, sustained success. The Aces and a listening front office were making them appear more and more like a sinking ship. She heard it repeatedly, and the worst part was that she couldn't blame them. She had tried to convince herself that it wasn't that bad. Wilson had spent the last few days phoning former teammates to check in and try to understand why so many of them were leaving, but the responses all started to sound the same. I just needed a fresh start. It wasn't personal, Azza, but things are different now, and I can't stay and